Everybody, welcome. Greg Strike Chin from Avid here, and I am joined by the incomparable Miss Kerry Leva. She's an amazing singer, songwriter, producer, educator. She's so many different things, but at heart, she is one of the most creative souls I've ever met, and we are so happy to have you here, Kerry. Welcome. First and foremost, how are you?
First of all, that was an incredible intro. Thank you so much. You're too kind. I'm good. I'm surviving. I think just like everybody else in what is a dumpster fire of a year, but I'm hanging. I'm doing well, all things considered. So,
I love the fact that you're joining us today to talk about songwriting and how you kind of approach that. Of course, yeah, we'll talk a little bit about Pro Tools Carbon and stuff a little bit later, and how that Pro Tools and Carbon, how that worked into some of your new music. But before we get into all that, glad you're safe. Can you tell us a little bit about your career, maybe just really quickly how you got started, and kind of where you find yourself now, and what you've been up to?
yeah, I mean, to say that I've been a musician for my whole life really isn't an understatement. I don't remember my life before music. When I was a kid, there was always music played everywhere in my house, the car. My dad's a musician, so I was exposed to this entire world very, very young. And when I was a kid, I actually asked him for piano lessons. And he himself, being an instrumental teacher, asked, well, do you want me to teach you, or do you want somebody else to teach you? And me saying, wait, why would I want anybody else to teach me? I want you to teach me. So fast forward several years, I got accepted to Berklee. And on the first day that I moved in, I immediately had a change of heart. I thought I was going to be a piano performance major. And I was like, but I'm hearing that I can make music with computers. This sounds interesting. So I applied to the music synthesis major. It's actually now called electronic production and design. Mm-hmm. But it was music synthesis way back when. And I got in, and I basically spent my entire college career learning how to make weird sounds and compose music through a computer, which still seemed so weird to me. And then from there, you and I both know Matt Lang. That's how you and I were actually introduced, which is awesome. And Matt and I, a long time ago, in a land far away, worked on a track together called Anywhere With You Is Home. And that became my first release on a sub-label of Armada. And then from there, I started doing kind of like featured vocals on trance and progressive records. Mm-hmm. And very quickly realized that was not what I wanted to do at all. I really liked to make the music.
Sure.
And there's a lot of stuff that goes into, being a featured vocalist and stuff that was not very appealing. And so I kind of took a step back and got back to the production side of things, and was really inspired by like Imogen Heap, how she kind of does everything herself and all of that. And kind of just spent a lot of time sort of figuring myself out and figuring out, who am I when I am not attached to another producer's name? Who am I when I am not kind of, just being the voice?
Certainly right now, I know you're preparing some stuff, and who knows, by the time this is out, maybe there's some stuff out, some of the new stuff out, but we are so lucky that you are going to share some of your workflow with us a little bit. So at this point, I'll let everyone know that you are one of the only people in the world. Before we launched Pro Tools Carbon, we had a couple of we call them pilot units. These are like prototype units. And I literally had 3 of them, I think, at that point in the world. And you got one of them. I was so stoked to get that to you, because I was really curious to see and hear and what your feedback was going to be, because, obviously from a songwriter, from a vocalist perspective, and being able to track, low latency at home and leveraging DSP, blah, 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 but also just using it, and someone who loves to listen to music, and someone who has, your ears are finely tuned to knowing what's good and what's not so good. So I was really looking for a lot of that feedback. So we got it over to you, and I was just so excited by the feedback that we got back from you. And I know that you've been using it to track vocals and work on some of this new music. So if it's okay, what I'd like to do right now is turn it over to you. And I know you're going to walk us through some of your workflow as far as your tracking workflow, how what that looks like and sounds like using Pro Tools and Carbon. So with that, I'll turn it over to you for a little bit. Sound good?
Cool. Sounds great.
Hey everyone, I'm Kerry Leva, and I'm going to be walking you through my song, You'll Know Where to Find Me. I'll talk about my songwriting process, the vocal tracking process, and how the song evolved once I got the final vocals recorded. So this is the very first demo of You'll Know Where to Find Me.
Won't wait up tonight, I'll leave on a light. You know where to find me when you wanna come home. I'll never assume to know what you're going through, but when you're ready, come back home. You'll know where to find me when you wanna come home. When you're ready, come back home.
Even though I didn't have really anything else aside from that, I at least had that down. And that started to inspire ways and ideas that I could let that section evolve over the course of the song. And so I have here some naturally tuned vocals. I have some very hard tuned vocals, kind of T-Pain-like, and I have some formant shifted vocals. And this is one of my favorite things to do when I'm layering vocals and everything. I absolutely love blending textures. And it's not something that I do in every single song, but I love the kind of contrast that you can get from a naturally tuned vocal and a very, very hard tuned vocal, one that's been like completely devoid of all character and emotion. So this is actually a case where in this particular section, some of the production choices that I ended up just kind of haphazardly making ended up actually inspiring writing choices for later on. And thankfully, I didn't have to wait too long for the song to take on a meaning. It's 2020. I've been through some stuff. I'm sure you've been through some stuff too. And I think with everything that has gone on this year, I've just been feeling all the things. And I think one of the things that has really weighed on me is just how divided our entire society is. And sometimes I feel irreparably so. And that started to kind of creep its way into a lyrical theme that I started off with and kind of turned itself into a first verse. To top it off, my family lost a couple of very important people. And, it also ended up kind of creeping, that sort of experience crept into the lyrics as well about what do you do when you have lost someone and you know they're gone, but the acceptance hasn't really quite settled in yet. And so this is, that kind of gave an actual meaning and an actual purpose to the lyrics of the hook. What I'd like to do is pivot and show a little bit about my tracking and what my tracking session actually looks like beyond just what you're looking at here, and kind of talk you through how some of the ideas that did end up making it to the final version of the song, or pre-final version of the song, actually were not necessarily planned, but rather kind of spur of the moment. So what I do is I import my instrumental, which is highlighted in front of us, and I set up a whole bunch of markers for each of my sections. And I create a brand new track for every single section and also every single vocal part. So in the case of my choruses, I have a track for each lead and or harmony line, which I label accordingly, sometimes C1 or H1, depending. So I'll go in, and I don't necessarily track in order of the song either. So what I'm usually doing is I'm tracking in order of like sections. So I might start with the verses. I'll do verse 1, but then I'll do verse 2 right after it. Or I'll do verse 2 and then I'll go to verse 1. 'Cause sometimes, for whatever reason, verse 1 doesn't always end up sounding as good as verse 2. I don't know why. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll start with my hooks and then I'll go to the verses and then I'll go to the pre's. So I don't have a specific sort of, procedure when it comes to tracking, except for the way in which I track my vocals. I always loop record, and I always get a good 6 to 10-ish takes down before I kind of pause and start listening back to those ideas and assess what's working and what's not. Because one thing that is a little bit tough is where I am the artist and the vocal producer and the engineer, I can't expect myself to wear all three of those hats at the same exact time and get the best vocals possible. And so by just kind of letting myself do a few takes and really try to focus on the performance aspect, when I'm listening back, that's when I can really kind of settle into the producer and engineer chair a bit more and kind of assess, all right, this line isn't really working, I need to do something differently, or I can't seem to get consistent takes in all of these, so why not? And by the way, you're seeing a lot of takes on this second verse. Sometimes that's what it takes, for me anyway. This was a particularly emotional song, and it ended up really kind of affecting me quite a bit. I really had a tough time tracking the second verse, and by the fact that there's little bits of verse cut out, that's actually an indicator. Those parts were just so bad that I was like, yeah, it's not even worth it. So sometimes I have to really kind of take the time to get the performance right and also, be able to actually perform. As somebody who has pretty much been producing out of, for all intents and purposes, a bedroom studio for the last several years, I've not really had money for a ton of outboard gear. I've also not really had space for a ton of outboard gear. It wasn't that long ago where my studio desk and my bed were only like a foot apart from each other. And I didn't really have a lot of money for things like preamps or anything like that. So I relied on a really good quality interface and a really good quality mic to get the job done. But when I was tracking, I never tracked into plugins or anything like that because latency. And so I've been really, really fortunate to be able to test out the new Pro Tools Carbon interface. Massive shout outs to Greg for making this happen. It's been really, really cool to get to use this because for me, it really actually did change my entire tracking workflow. And so what I do is I just go in and press that little green lightning, get myself in DSP mode. And while I don't have access to all of my plugins when my tracks are in DSP mode, that's not my goal at this stage in my process, right? Now, I tend to prefer the DMG Audio Equality plugin for my EQ. And that's not available to me when I'm in DSP mode. But I just put the EQ and the compressor on for tracking purposes, just to kind of give myself a little bit of a closer representation of what my vocal will sound like in the finished track. And so for that, all I really need is just a little bit of low cut, and then everyone's got this kind of trash can type of sound to their voices. You can probably hear mine. It sounds horrible. I'm going to stop now. But I just needed to scoop out a little bit of that resonance. And then I put this through a compressor. And thankfully, one of my go-tos, which is Empirical Labs Arouser, that actually is supported by DSP. So I was able to use that. And this really, I didn't think it would make any difference, really. It sounded interesting to me, but I wasn't really sure how much I was going to use it. It's night and day in terms of the performance that I was able to give. And it doesn't mean that I'm singing perfectly on pitch all the time. In fact, there's a lot of bum notes in a lot of these takes. But what it did for me, and one part of the tracking process that it made a lot easier was before, when I was just tracking straight, with no plugins or anything like that, I was able to get my input gain right. I was able to get, pretty much everything good. But it always felt like I still had to kind of just sing a little bit more than I necessarily wanted to have to do for what I was doing in the song. It kind of always felt like I had to overperform a little bit. And while I still got really good results, at least for what I was looking for, most of the time, it always felt like I had to put in a little bit more effort than maybe I was supposed to. And so by tracking in DSP low latency mode, even just putting a simple EQ and a simple compressor on my vocal with literally no latency, just none, that made such a difference because I could just sing, which leads me to kind of the final product. So this is my final production session. This is where my comped, edited, tuned, and time-corrected vocals go to be finalized in the production and in the mix. And so I kind of alluded to previously that sometimes I'll come up with vocal parts and they will get used in the track and sometimes used as part of the production. And so this often happens with a lot of the backing vocals that I like to come up with, and that happened here. So the original production, the original instrumental of this song kind of started off with just piano. It was like a stretched reverse piano and also like a contact cello and like a little plucky synth that I made in FM8. And as the song arrangement started to take a different shape, where I, got a second verse in and not just the first verse, and I started to get these ideas for some ad-libs and stuff, I realized that it wasn't really going to work to go, chorus, verse, chorus out. I wanted to actually, I almost never have bridges in my song, but it made sense to do that here, kind of. And in that, it kind of influenced the way that I was going to produce out the rest of the track. And in this particular case, one of my favorite things to do is just kind of take some of my vocals and mess around with them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a couple of my ad-libs that sound like this. Pretty straightforward. And they sit like that in this particular section. The other one that I'll play is this one here, and it sounds like this. So both of these parts ended up fitting in pretty well as they were, but they also made for really kind of cool additional textures in the song itself. And so I love Output's Portal. And so I threw that on one of the backing vocals, along with Valhalla Supermassive and Eventide Black Hole as well. And so one of those backing parts became this. Which, I mean, who doesn't like a good vocal wash, really? You know? It was something that, I don't know, it was probably a happy accident, maybe, I can't even remember, but as soon as I kind of threw that in, I was like, no, this definitely has to stay. This is what I think is a really cool pad, and I think it adds a really nice additional texture, and it's kind of just something that's nice to open up the song. And so I partnered it with the other line. And it floats. And I really like that. And this is the kind of stuff that I love doing. And you know, even though most of my songs end up relying pretty heavily on vocals and chords, usually through piano in some, regard, my songs always kind of have these elements of, I don't know, detail or texture or stuff that I really kind of like to put in, and, maybe people won't notice them right away. Maybe they won't notice them on first listen. Maybe they won't notice them ever. But they're there for me because I notice this stuff, and it's, for me now, a really important part of the song, even though it's kind of minimal. And that all came from my voice, and that all just came from a couple of parts that I sort of came up with on the fly as I was tracking the vocals. So that's really it in terms of my song and the writing. One thing that I'll say is, what you're looking at right now and what you'll be about to listen to is not the entirely finished final song. There's still some things that are, now to be beefed up. Like, for instance, going to need a little bit more going on in the drums. Definitely going to need to go in with some more detailing on the vocals, specifically the vocals that are very hard tuned and formant shifted. And definitely going to need to give this baby a mix. But it's still, right now, the song arrangement in terms of the structure is done, the writing is done, and with all luck, by the time you're actually watching this video, the song will be either already out or very, very close to it. And if you like what you're about to hear, I hope that you will go find this on Spotify or Apple Music or Bandcamp or wherever you choose to listen to stuff, and give it a few spins. So thank you so much for your time. I hope that this was helpful, and I'm going to leave you with the song as it stands right now.
Won't wait up tonight. I'll leave on a light. You'll know where to find me when you wanna come home. I'll never assume to know what you're going through, but when you're ready, come back home. You'll know where to find me when you wanna come home. When you're ready, come back home. feeling 6 feet longer without you on the other side. And like the air outside, my food is getting colder, but I can't stomach just one bite. And I know it's how it has to be, but I can't let go of all that could have been. No, won't wait up tonight. I'll leave on a light. You'll know where to find me when you wanna come home. I'll never assume to know what you're going through. When you're ready, come back home. You'll know where to find me when you wanna come home. When you're ready, come back home. I'm planting images of you inside my mind for another time, maybe another life. 'Cause all the rain can't bring me flowers this time. And no amount of hope brings peace of mind. And I know it's how it has to be. I gotta let you go with all that could have been. Oh.
Awesome. We're back with Kerry Leva. Kerry, thank you so much for that overview. That was absolutely incredible. I know that so many folks are going to be wowed by that in so many different ways. Kerry, thank you. We're going to say goodbye to everyone now. Make sure you check out Kerry Leva from all of us at Avid, and from Kerry, thank you, and we'll see you next time. Take care.